individual following the car and building fire in the early morning hours of January 9th at 6800 North 76th Street. It is impossible, even after hearing from all firefighters who responded to this incident, to ever prove precisely how each and every member did not see or lay eyes on this unfortunate deceased individual. Of this we are sure, not a single firefighter did see her. We also know that nobody was ever specifically ordered to search the vehicle's passenger compartment. This is embarrassing for our organization, but worse, it is undoubtedly extremely angering and adds to the anguish of the victim's family. Regretfully, none of the information I am about to share will diminish that pain that the family of the deceased victim has suffered in the aftermath of this event. And again, I apologize for this, but it did occur, and we must absolutely work to prevent this from ever happening again. I would like to offer to you several of the key factors that we believe contributed to this miss. None of these, not a single one, is offered as an excuse, but each are possible reasons. From that information, we're going to be able to construct some very positive change. This follows somewhat of a chronology here. One engine company and one ladder company arrived with the provided information of an auto fire. And what they found was an auto fire and a structure fire. Each of these placed very different operational demands on the responding crews. They immediately requested additional help. The members on that crew made a commendable and the correct decision at that moment to split their now outmatched fire crews to begin extinguishment on the exterior, beginning with the auto and the exterior of the building, while simultaneously forcing entry into and searching inside the involved building. Nobody was observed self-evacuating from that building. It was not believed at the time that it was occupied. I think there is some sensitivity that there is always the potential for squatters inside of a vacant building. In either case, it was an extremely large building, and to check that fire, we had to get inside. Based upon that real potential for fire spread into this building, and even as the auto fire and the exterior of the building were being extinguished, much focus was shifted to the building interior by the majority of the other inbound and responding companies. While we do have a standard operating guideline covering the matter of an auto fire and searching within, the nature of a guideline allows for deviations where defensible and appropriate. In this case, following the initial extinguishment of the auto and the initial knockdown of that building exterior, and prior to being fed a continuous water supply from a later arriving engine company attached to a fire hydrant, the initial engine company ran its 500 gallons of onboard water out. It seems a kind of an extraneous detail to include, but they expended all of their water putting the car fire out, which was extinguished at that time on the front of this building, and attention was then turned to gaining this continuous water supply. We only carry so much water on these fire engines. Now, with stubborn fire inside the combustible wooden facade and possibly creeping into the overhang and roof areas of this incredibly large building, that water supply from the later arriving engine company was handled, additional hose lines were put into operation, and the focus on chasing the fire along the exterior wall and into the roof line continued in earnest. Of note, the interior operating conditions inside this building were very, very low visibility due to extremely dense smoke. On that note, as we work to protect our own personnel from the scourge of cancers that disproportionately impact firefighters, we aggressively rotate our personnel assigned inside of these poisonous, toxic, dangerous to life atmospheres. The air we carry in our SCBA cylinders is finite. It only lasts so long. When you really, really go to work at arrival at a working fire of any kind, you're between 13, maybe 16 or 17 minutes of bottle time. And it's different for everybody, different depending on the workloads. The focus at this moment in time then, having shifted largely to the building as later arriving units and chiefs arrived and began their tasks, with the initial personnel assigned to this car having been rotated out, new personnel assignments were made. as the vehicle had been extinguished and the mission focus at this incident crept necessarily to the building, new crews were not ever specifically reassigned to the vehicle. I had to interrupt myself and tell you, not a single bit of this is meant to be an excuse. I just want you to all understand what happened here. It is possible, and I have to emphasize, and if you're going to quote this, I need you to include this part of it. This has not been claimed, what I'm about to say, by any of our members. I've been racking my brain to find some reasonable explanation that would alleviate the concern and the pain this has caused the family. I want to add that while working in the dark of this scene, we have seen flood lighting, we have emergency vehicle lights, there's other ambient light. This creates a visual void space in areas, in this case in the specific area of the vehicle where this person was later found. I'd like you to consider the floodlights on your cameras when you're operating in the dark of night. I'd ask you to just understand what that does to your own night vision, your ability to quickly now see into darker spaces. It's not offered as an excuse, certainly not being advanced as some sort of catch-all. We're just trying to cover all of the different factors that may have accounted for this. This is such a unique situation to have so many of our members in such close proximity to this vehicle and nobody did see her. So we're trying to understand the operational end of things, the entire environment and the dynamic transfer and shift that occurred on this scene. And we get that this provides no solace to those mourning the loss of their loved one. But we have to look at these details. We have to get into these things in order to ensure that we can prevent a recurrence. In the course of firefighting, certainly there's a large amount of steam in and around the vehicle and the building during the extinguishing and immediately following. This is worsened in extremely cold weather. It was a very cold, wet morning. This may account for how members working in and around the area didn't inadvertently see the victim through the windows of the vehicle, which were the window space. The windows had popped out in the burn. That steam and that smoke would account for people walking by and just not even accidentally looking in and seeing. You can't see through that. With the subsequent crew rotations and reassignments, the actual fire in the vehicle no longer requiring suppression efforts, it was out. And the ongoing efforts directed at the building, the search of the building was missed. Our early arriving crew shifted gears with the resources they had. We didn't follow back up at any point subsequent and ensure that that vehicle had been searched. Again, nobody has told me this. It's my sense from this rapidly changing scene. There may have been just the belief that, well, I wasn't assigned there, so somebody else must have done that. Nobody's advanced that, but we have a lot of people and a lot of moving parts at these scenes. While we are clear that this miss occurred without intent or malice, we are changing our auto fire standard operating guideline to more closely reflect that of our structure fire standard operating guidelines specific to search procedures. This will be reflected by fixing the accountability for a specific series of searches to the person in command. We call that the incident commander. That incident commander exists at all incidents, small to large, regional, national. It's based upon the requirements of the emergency at hand and the resources drawn in. A structure fire search, and moving forward, our auto fire search, it exists over the affected physical areas, but in a series of 3 searches, and it is purposely and intentionally repetitive. The primary search, this is the first search. This occurs as early as possible in a fire incident. It is typically very rapid. It's aimed at the worst interior portions of a building into which a firefighter is even able to gain access, and it occurs under incredibly unforgiving and many times in an uncontrolled and changing environment. This would now apply to very likely the immediate following of that extinguishment of that car. The secondary search. This occurs as more fire companies arrive on a scene. It is more methodical. It is assigned to cover all of the areas of the building, in this case also the car. This typically occurs very shortly after positive control of a fire in a building or a building area has occurred. And it allows for a more comprehensive search of each affected space. Lastly, the final search occurs after the incident has been completely brought under control and no more emergency exists. This search occurs with no other ongoing tasks occurring simultaneously, and this allows our crews to focus on what is before them with no other audio or visual impedances or concerns. Each of these searches that I just described is ideally conducted by separate and distinct personnel. This is also done on purpose so that we get different sets of eyes on the same space. People observe things in different ways, and we might as well maximize that. This update to our standard operating guideline will be implemented and operationalized using a number of different methods. We're going to do an immediate online standard operating guideline review of this new standard operating guideline. That can occur as early as today, depending upon how fast we can push this out. In-person battalion chief-led discussion of expectations with all crews and all shifts. This will be the more local battalion chief meeting with all of their crews in their battalion across all 3 of our shifts to be able to discuss and understand the new additions to the standard operating guideline. Lastly, company-based training. This will become part of our regular review process for all of our standard operating guidelines, fire or EMS, that occurs at the company level as a refresher. I cannot emphasize enough that these contributing factors that I have explained here today are not presented to you as excuses. They are the facts as we have discovered them and the sequence of events as we have reassembled them from the testimony of our members. I am acutely aware that this does little to quell the family's pain or anger, and I am so very sorry for this. One point of clarity we would like to make. One of our members was quoted in a medical examiner's report surmising that it may have been possible for the victim to have been moved from the driver's seat to the back passenger side seat by the force of a fire hose used in extinguishing the car fire. We are not entirely sure in what exact context this statement was made, but would like to revisit this to advise that the chances of this happening are nearly non-existent. Nor do we recall ever having observed this to happen in our previous experiences with car fires. We believe our member was attempting to be helpful and provided an uninformed response in a conversation at the tow lot, and that it made its way into the report. I felt the extreme implausibility of this theory warranted a public correction. Let us not forget that in all of this, the family has suffered a great deal. We are sorry, I am sorry for the Milwaukee Fire Department's contribution to that pain. And as I've just detailed for you, we're taking very, very real steps to prevent a recurrence. This is what I have, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Do you know who was driving the car and how the woman ended up in the back?
We have absolutely no idea, sir. I have absolutely no information in one direction or another on that.
So we have no idea how the woman ended up in that position to be in that car or why the car was there?
That's correct. I have no idea.
Any toxicology available on the victim?
I believe the ME's office is specifically exploring that as part of their work. I have not yet heard back on that.
How much longer do you expect your internal review to go for?
The internal review is done.
Oh, it's done, okay.
It is done,
Okay.
yes. That's why I wanted to, I feel like it's taken way too long. It just takes a while to gather the information and cipher it all together and make sense of it. But I wanted to get it out to you as soon as we had it. So.
Just to be clear, will there be any discipline as a part of this?
We are absolutely confident that there was absolutely no malice, there was no intent to miss this. There was most definitely a miss. I've said this over and over again. We are not going to be meting out any discipline on our members in this case. This demands protocol change. This demands retraining. We have to absorb in our investigation into this the mental gear shift that was required, and the time at which people come in and they're observing facts and occurrences in front of them is different than the people that have been there already. That makes nobody feel any better about this. But I have to look at this from the realistic point of view that my firefighters faced that day. And I'll be real frank with you. There's nothing I could do to them that would make them feel worse than they already feel right now. We're incredibly proud of what we do, and 99 times out of 100, more than that, we perform with no such slights like this. When it does happen, our members feel absolutely terrible. And whether anybody believes it or not, they feel terrible to the degree that we're working to make sure that they're actually okay, because I think they do understand what this has done to this family. It's horrible. So,
have you delivered your review to the family prior to reviewing it with us
yes,
publicly?
I have. Yes, I have.
And do you know the cause of the fire? Can you kind of...
We are strongly in belief that where the vehicle struck the building was where primary electric conduit runs on the outside of the building, and it would appear based on the timeline from videos and whatnot that fire started towards the front of the car near the point where it made contact with the building. We believe that possibly that impact on that pipe fractured that conduit and caused there to be direct electrical current contact, a short, and began the vehicle on fire in that way.
Is it possible that the driver abandoned the vehicle after that accident and left that woman in the car?
That and a whole bunch of other things are possible, yes. I have no information to support that. I don't know. But it is a possibility, to answer your question.
But you believe that she was in the back of the car when that vehicle struck the building?
I don't know that. I also can't say that for certain.
So she could have been the driver?
That's also true. She could have been. That is true.
Not to sound too harsh, of course, it is a good thing that you guys are now having these searches, but why wasn't it this distinct in the beginning? You know, why wasn't the process this full on? You need to check it when you're done with the fire is under control. You know, why is it now? Of course, it's just coming to a head because of this incident, but why wasn't it such a rigorous process then? I feel as if I have answers that are going to leave you completely unsatisfied, but I'll tell you the truth on the matter is, if this vehicle was standalone in the middle of a parking lot and there was not a building involved, every one of my 8 firefighters responding to that would have been focused solely on the vehicle. And we have never had to re-emphasize this search as so critical before, because we haven't had this sort of miss. So out of an abundance of, or a lack of an abundance of need, because it had been performed with no issues so many times, we thought it best to really, really make it specific and fix the accountability moving forward. This can't happen. I can't make it not have happened, but we can do everything in our power to make sure this doesn't happen again. I don't know if that is remotely satisfying to your question, but that is the reason.
The procedure changes that you're pursuing, will they require approval from the FPC?
So we send all of our SOGs, everything, every piece of documentation we have goes to the FPC. In this case, for an operational change like this, I can go ahead and make this, and they will follow on and put it through their own review process, either administrative or at the board level.
So, do you have a timeline for when everything will be approved and everything will be?
Well, we're doing this.
Okay.
yeah, we can't wait. So we are doing this, like I said, as fast as we can get the final copy all formatted and everything and push through. Yeah, this is happening.
What were the previous procedures for an auto fire checking it before, and so it's 3 people, or there's 3 steps now. What was it before now?
It was that a member would take a tool, because typically that environment, even after you extinguish that fire, it's still superheated. So you'd make use of an extension, a hand tool. We have pike poles, they pull with the hook on it. We would take the handle side of it, and you'd lean in and you'd feel through that car window unless you could get the door open. And if you are able to enter the atmosphere, a hands-on search is always ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the vision at that point in a firefight it's nil, so you have to rely on hands. So it was fairly one-dimensional, and we are, as I just detailed, we're going to add a check and a cross-check to it, just out of an abundance of caution.
Have you seen images of the victim after she was discovered?
Yes. Yes.
And from looking at those images, would it have been difficult for anyone at the scene to see her clearly in the back of that vehicle?
No. You folks all have my number if you have any other questions, but I appreciate you covering it. I appreciate your interest in it, and if I haven't said it enough, we do feel absolutely terrible about this, and I'm so sorry, and if I could do anything to take the family's pain away, I would. We're sorry.